Morning. All right, today we get to start a new Masechet Avodah Zarah. Whenever we talk about learning Masechet Avodah Zarah, we got to make sure to include the word Masechet because I guess we could say learning about Avodah Zarah. But in any event, we definitely do not want to quote unquote do Avodah Zarah. But in any event, that's the Masechet that we're up to next. Why is it the next of the Masechet? Well, let me share my screen and we'll get started. So we talked about the prohibition and punishment that's associated with Avodah Zarah back in Masechet Sanhedrin. And so to some degree, what we're going to be discussing now follows that conversation. In fact, let's take a look at the first Tosos, even before we get to the Gemara. Lifnei Eideihen, Basar de Tani Sanhedrin. After we have learned Sanhedrin, the Iri Be'ovid Kochavim Umazalos, that talks about the worship of the stars and the constellations. Tananami Loha Maseches. That's why we're going to now learn this Maseches Avodah Zarah. Beseder Yeshuos, in this ordering of salvation. Umihu Makos Ushuas. But what about why do we need to have Makos and Shvuas first? Because the Sheichi Sanhedrin, because they are more relevant to a court. Lahachitani lahu basar Sanhedrin. So that's why they learn them. We learn those two topics right after Sanhedrin. Ba'acharei came choser l'sadre. Afterwards, we return back to the order of Vishonim Maseches Avodah Zarah v'Horios. And now we're going back to take a look, and we'll be looking at Avodah Zarah and Horios. So that is the point that Tosos makes. Again, the idea is that we've been talking about this topic, but we had other topics that were a little bit more related that we wanted to cover first. And so now we get to Maseches Avodah Zarah. So that's point number one that I wanted to make. In this Masechet, we will not be as much discussing the prohibition of the worship itself, but rather various limitations on either interactions with idols or interactions with idolaters to reduce their influence and our connection with them. And so we are going to begin by discussing restrictions on doing business with idolaters. So let's take a look at the first Mishnah. Lifnei Eideihen, and the term Eideihen is going to be discussed in the Gemara, but basically it's their holidays is what it's referring to. Before the holidays, shel avod ovdei kochavim, of idol worshippers. So shlosha yamim, 3 days. Also l'seis in the 3 days before the holiday, you are prohibited to do business with them. Lahashilan, to lend them. Lishol mehen, to borrow from them. Lahalvosan, to lend them money. Viluvos mehen, and to borrow money from them. Liforan, to pay them. To repay them for some debt, and to accept payment from them. So now Rashi has 2 points that we should definitely make here. So let's take a look at the top 2 Rashis on Maseches Avodah Zarah. First 2 Rashis in Maseches Avodah Zarah. Livnei Eidein shel ovdei kochavim gimel yam also l'seis mahen. All of these, why is this prohibition here? Although we are going to be discussing it in more detail in the coming days, mishum de azil umode lavos kochavim b'yom ido. Because what are they going to do on their holiday? And why are we focused on the holiday? Because on their holiday, they're going to be worshiping their idol. And what we don't want them to do is engage in additional worship based on something that we did with them. And so they're going to be so happy about our business deal that they're going to go and say thank you to their idol. And that we don't want to be any involved in that at all. And so that's point number 1 that Rashi makes. Point number 2 that Rashi makes, fascinating point to think about, is the difference between she'elah and lovet, and milavet, and to, whether it's borrowing or borrowing and borrowing. They're both can be referred to as borrowing, but let's take a look, and Rashi really helps us out here. She'elah, when you use the term she'elah, b'midi dahadar be'in. The idea is that you're returning the item in its current form. So if I lend you my tefillin, you're going to give me back the same pair of tefillin. If I lend you my backpack, you're going to give me the same backpack back. Kagon behema, if I give you an animal, the kalim, or vessels, you're going to give me the same animal back. Diksiv ki al ish me imre right? In Parakaf Bet, this is Pasuk Yud Gimel, when one asked to borrow something from his friend. So that's the situation where we're talking about you borrow something that you're going to give back in its current form. You borrow my car, you give back my car. You borrow any kind of object of mine. You borrow my dog. You want to go on a walk with the dog, and you borrow my dog. I don't have a dog, but if I had a dog, then you'd give back the same dog. So, however, when it comes to Malva, and then now we're on the last line of the wide lines in Rashi at the top of the page. Malva b'midish de lo hader be'ein. When we use the term borrowing with respect to malva, the term malva is when you borrow something and you aren't going to give back the same item. So that's, for example, kagon mos. The best example of that is money, right? If I give you money, if I give you, 520s, I am not expecting those same 520s to come back to me. I'm giving you the money so that you use it for some purpose, and you're going to give me other 20s, or you'll give me $100 bill, or you'll give me 10 10s. The bottom line is that you're not going to necessarily give me that exact money back. Diksiv im kesef tilveh et ami, if you're going to loan money to my nation, demalve lahotza nitna, because we say that a loan of money is meant for usage. It's meant for going out with it. It's not meant to just put it in the to just put it in a pile and then take it back out. Umishalem lo mos acherim, and people pay back other money. So that's a key distinction between love and she'ela, and so very interesting and useful Rashi. Okay.
So this wouldn't have been an issue in the time of the Mishnah, but it would have been an issue in Rashi's time. There were so many various festivals on the Christian calendar in the Middle Ages that this would have been, if we followed it, this would have been interpreted Christianity as Avodah Zarah. We would not have been able to ever do business with Christians, which obviously was not something that we followed.
Yes. So excellent point. And we can actually use that point to just do a little bit of Tosos, because Tosos, and you're touching on, because obviously what you're saying about Rashi's time would be true about Tosos's time as well. Where Tosos was, Tosos is obviously not one individual, but rather a group of individuals, many of whom, several of whom, I shouldn't say many, several of whom were Rashi's grandchildren, including Rabbeinu Tam. And so we're not talking about too far beyond the age of Rashi. And Tosos essentially asks, how is it that we do business in today's world? Because after all, isn't it in fact a violation? Aren't there all these Christian holidays? Mm-hmm. So first, we'll just do a very small pieces of it, just to give you a taste of the Tosos. So if you go, we're doing the third Tosos on Beis Amud Aleph, Ve'ein Asur L'Sheol. So we're all the way at the beginning. We just started. Yeah. Exactly. Welcome back, Stan.
Thank you so much. I miss you guys.
No worries. So here we go. We're right on this Tosos. We're going to skip down into the middle of it, and then we'll be doing a couple of lines here and there. Okay, so if you skip down to the first parenthetical in the Tosos where it says L'kamen Vav Amud Aleph. So and then we're going to go to the end of the word. So again, the question that Tosos asks is, how is it that we have, well, let's do the question. So the question is the last word, 3 lines down from where the Tosos starts. The kasha almal samchu ha'olam laseis l'seis biyom id ha'avodas kochavim. How is it that in our days, people are all doing business with idol worshipers, even on the day of their holidays? Okay, so, all right, so then we'll go skip down to the first parenthetical, last word on the line. The Ein Lomar, you should not say Dahainu Taima Mishum de Ovde Kochavim Shebechutz La'aretz Lav Ovde Avodas Kochavim Ela Minag Avoseim Biyadam. Don't say that the people who are worshiping the gods today, false gods today, are just following the footsteps of their parents and aren't really engaged in it. That doesn't work. Rather, again, 3 lines down from that, 1 line above where it says Sham Daf Vav Amabet, first word on the line, Nira Deshari Mishum Ava. It seems like the reason that we allow it is because we're worried that if we don't deal with them, then they will really hate us. All right, so that's point number 1. But then if we go to the last word on the
I was
first
going to say
line,
they actually really did hate us for
100%, absolutely. So they would have hated us even more. So okay, so now we go to the first of the widest lines at the bottom of Tosos, and last word on the line. Lekach nira de tam haheter mishum de akum shebeinenu kimlan bigavayu delo palchu lavos kochavim. So Tosos here says something remarkable, that the people that we're dealing with aren't really idol worshipers. So that's the next point that he makes. Okay, and then if you go 2 lines down from that, he says inami yesh lismoch ahitana b'Yerushalmi, that we can rely on the opinion in the Yerushalmi. Amaslisin de asur l'seis tani, that when it comes to doing business, the medvar mamurim, what are we talking about when it comes to doing business? She'enu makiro. It's only somebody who's not Jewish who doesn't know you. So if you know the person who you're doing business with, then it's fine. Right? The point is that you're not, you're just, you're being a friend. You're not actually, doing anything wrong. The Rabbeinu Tam, 1 line down from that, 6 words into the line. The Rabbeinu Tam, Vav Reish Tuf. What does it mean that it's prohibited to do business? It's only when it comes to something that they're going to actually use in their worship. It's funny because my understanding is like the largest seller of Hail Mary beads is maybe actually a Jewish firm. But in any event, so that would suggest that that would not be appropriate. But in any event, the low Iri klal biliknos, and it doesn't apply at all to us buying from them. Devadai shari bein lilishna da azel umoda bein lilishna delifnei iver. Whether you follow any of the 2 opinions, that the 2 potential issues are we actually setting up the non-Jew to violate? Because there's a prohibition of engaging in behavior that facilitates somebody else or encourages somebody else to do something wrong. Okay. And so that applies even to non-Jews. Meaning I might have thought that only it would apply to Jews, but no, even if I were to facilitate a non-Jew engaging in behavior that is prohibited for non-Jews. So for example, there are, the concept of Aver min achai, not eating from a live animal. If you were to set up a stand that allows non-Jews to eat Aver min achai, that would be very wrong. So, so again, the idea is that only something that actually might be used. So all of that is to address the point that Charlie made, which is that this was really an issue of how do we do business, and the way they overcame it was to either follow one of the different answers that Tosos gave, essentially, to say that actually it's okay. Some people now, based on that, will say either that the reason that it's permitted today is because it was a takana that we weren't able to keep and therefore it doesn't apply, or again, for any of the reasons that we just said, it may not apply. All right, but that was the main opinion. But there was the lastest thing that we said is that you could even accept payments of repayments of debt from the non-Jew. Here, Rebbe Yehuda disagrees. So we go back into the Mishnah. We're on the 4th line, 2nd word on the line. Rebbe Yehuda Omer, Nifrain Mehen. We can accept payments from them. Because people don't like to pay money. Even if they owe the money, people don't like to pay money. But Amrulo, the rabbis who were the Tanakama say back to him, no, although nobody likes to pay the money now, he will be so happy that he's not under your thumb any longer, that he's not, right, that he's fully repaid. We all know the feeling of, paying off a mortgage or paying off student loans. It's a great feeling to no longer have that obligation on top of your head. So as a result, the rabbis say, no, even in that situation, you can't accept, because again, either you're facilitating his performance of idol worship, and therefore it's, or he's going to engage in additional idol worship because of, he's going to be thankful for your reaction. Now we're going to go into the Gemara. And
before you go on, I'll just mention Steinsaltz says a note that the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch say that this halakha in the Mishnah about not doing business with Jews no longer applies, and the reasons given are basically what you just quoted in Tosafot.
Yes, exactly. That I thought I didn't put it as clearly as that, but that's exactly right. That's what I was trying to convey. That in fact we don't really hold of these rules today. Obviously, if there were a true, I guess if you go to some country where they really do engage in idol worship, then you actually really should ask a question about it if you're going in connection or near one of their holidays. Okay. Rav Shmuel, so now Rav and Shmuel are going to have an interesting machlokas, and it's one of these machlokot where we don't know which one says which, but Rav and Shmuel are going to argue or disagree about the nature of the word Eidehen. We translated it as their holidays, but what's the root of it? So Chad Tani Eidehen, as we have it with an aleph, V'chad Tani Eidehen with an ayin. So Mandatani Eidehen lo mishtamesh. So and Mandatane Edeyen lo mishtabesh. I'm sorry, mishtabesh. The one that taught it with an aleph is not mistaken, and the one that taught it with an ayin is not mistaken. Mandatane Edeyen lo mishtabesh. With an aleph, it's not mistaken because it's based on the words of the following pasuk. Diksiv ki karov yom edam. This is from Dvarim Perek Lamed Bet, Pasuk Lamed Hey, where it says that the day of their destruction is near. So the idea is that although we are referring to the holidays of the non-Jews, what we're really wishing is that those non-Jews be destroyed, because the idol worship and the concept of idol worship is so negative. And, again, let's back up and just note, what's the problem with idol worship? At the end of the day, the problem with idol worship is that you're worshiping something that you created, and therefore, if the rules are such that you created them, then effectively you can do whatever you want. And so we've seen elsewhere in the Gemara how the Jewish people actually, wanted to engage in idol worship, not because they believed in the idols, but they wanted a means for them to justify their improper behavior. And so as a result, that's why they engaged in idol worship. So effectively, idol worship is really saying all that matters is what I think the world should be. I'm not going to count God's commandments towards us in any way. I'm not going to think about, I don't have to think about the other. I can come up with my own approach, and that's all that I need to do. And so that's and so as a result, it's that approach of idol worship that we are wishing for their downfall.
So on that issue, nowadays people don't necessarily become idol worshipers; they become atheists. And I remember seeing an interview with Anne Rand, who is a notorious atheist, although she was actually halakhically Jewish, and she said she was an atheist because she thought it was wrong for religion to restrain people's conduct.
Right. Well, of course, that is exactly what religion is there to do.
Yeah.
So, that would be a very inappropriate thing to do. So essentially, she's being an atheist in order to accomplish that same goal. So you're absolutely right.
And she was famous for her antisocial behavior.
Right. Arguably, effectively, depending on why you're an atheist and how you behave, the atheist attitude can also be an attitude that says basically, I don't care what other people think. I'm focusing just on myself, and my evaluation of everything is the only thing that matters. So, and that would be, again, in not an attitude that we don't want to support. So that we've explained Adam with an Adehem with an Aleph is that we're hinting to the fact that we're hoping for their destruction. The second is an Adein with an Ayin. So that also is not mistaken. It says in Yeshaya that let them bring their witnesses and they will be vindicated. And so the ayin, I don't know why they needed to choose that specific verse. It's interesting to choose that verse, but the bottom line is that ayin is for Eidehen, meaning witnesses, as we've seen many times in the Gemara. So Uman Tane Eidehen, my time alo Tane Eidehen. So why do they teach it with an aleph instead of an ayin? Why does he say it that way? Why doesn't he agree with the other opinion? Amar Lach, Tavra Adif. We want their destruction. So that's why we're going to go with the aleph. Umanda Tani Edayan, my time alo Tani Edayan. So why, if you use it with an ayin, why don't you use it with an aleph? So Amar Lach, man kagarim lehu tavra. What is it that's going to cause the destruction of the idol worshippers? It's the testimony that they're going to give against themselves. Hilkach edus adifa. Therefore, we want to focus on that. Meaning, don't focus on the end result. Focus on the cause. The cause is that they're going to testify about their own behavior in a manner that shows that they are not appropriate people and therefore deserve to be punished. And so let's focus on that. So one second though, but 1 second, that pasuk that you cited with an ayin that suggests that that the idol worshiping holidays are based on the name of them is based on the testimony that they'll do against themselves about their idol worship. But that phrase in that pasuk is about Habi Yisrael Ksiv. It's written about the Jewish people. Dam Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, citing that pasuk, Kol mitzvos Yisrael osin ba'olam hazeh, ba'os umi'idos lahen la'olam haba. Every mitzvah that we do in this world somehow will come to testify for us in the world to come. Whether you say that that's an angel, there are lots of ways you can interpret it, but the bottom line is that, and the simplest way is that we did it, right? It is, Hashem saw it and therefore knows that it actually happened. And so as a result, it's going to come to testify. Meaning that the Jewish people are going to have witnesses to their good actions, and they will be vindicated. Elu Yisrael, that's referring to the Jewish people. And what refers to the non-Jews? That's the end of that same pasuk where it says, V'yishme'u v'yomru emes. And they're going to hear, everybody else, every other nation is going to hear, and they're going to say it's true, that we were good, that we did behave, that we did do mitzvah. Elu ovdei kochavim, that's the idol worshipers. Meaning the idol worshipers are not going to only testify against themselves, as we're going to see, but they're also going to testify on our behalf that we're true to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Ella Amar Rav Huna Breda Rav Yoshua Manda Amar Eidayan Mehacha. No, the proper citation for Eidayan with an ayin is the following pasuk, and this is a pasuk also in Yeshaya, and indeed it's one perek later, so it's perek mem dalid pasuk tet instead of perek mem gimel pasuk tet. So yotzrei fesel kulam tohu v'chamudeihen valyo ilu ve'edeim hema, that all who fashion statues are empty, and the objects of their adoration are not going to be successful. They are their witnesses. So the point is that that is definitely referring to idol worshipers, that the idols themselves will effectively be the witnesses of the negative actions of the idol worshipers. Okay, so having cited Mem Gimel Tet in the in our discussion that we just had, we are now going to have for the rest of today a story that outlines what's going to happen in the world to come in terms of the conversation that God is going to have with the other nations. Darish Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa. So either Chanina Bar Papa Or Rabbi Simlai taught the following: La'asid blavo, in the God willing, in the future, maybe Hakadosh Baruch Hu Sefer Torah. God's going to take a Torah scroll, and he's going to be holding it against his chest. I don't know why we need to use the physical form in order to accomplish this, but we're viewing God in this story as judge. Lumisha Asakba, and God's going to say, whoever dealt with the Torah, whoever engaged in the Torah, Yavo v'yitol scharo, should come and take the reward.
Right.
Miyad miskabtzin uvan optikol chavim birabuvia. Everybody wants it. Everybody, they come in as like a whole mob, and they don't just come in an organized fashion. They come in all mixed up. Shene'amar, citing that beginning of the verse in Parak Mem Gimel Pasuk Tet, Kol shahagoyim nikbetzu yachtav, that all of the nations are going to come in all together. So Amar lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God says to them, Al tikansu lefanai be'erbuvia, don't come in all mixed up. El tikanes kol umma v'umma, every nation should come in individually. V'sofreha, along with its sofrim. Now Rashi here says v'chachameha, it's intelligentsia, or it's scholars. I wonder whether it's actually saying it's historians, it's record keepers, because the point is that God's going to be asking, like, what did you do? And so the record keepers are the people who are going to be able to say what happened. Shenemar v'yasfu umim, right? The pasuk then continues and says v'yasfu umim, that they're going to, the leumim are going to be assembled, and leumim has that same word om in it. The ein laom ela malchus, and laom is referring to a kingdom. Shenemar ulaom milaom yamatz, that one kingdom will overpower the other kingdom. This is a pasuk in Bereshis, Parak Kaf Hey, pasuk Lamed, pasuk Kaf Gimel. So the point is that Hashem sees everybody wants the reward, so they all come in mixed up, and Hashem says, no, you got to get. Let's line up. One second. Why does God need everybody to line up? God can, as we're going to see in a moment, let's take a look at Rashi. Why does God need everybody to line up? Rashi actually helps us here, citing a pasuk and a Gemara elsewhere that helps emphasize exactly what the question is. Third line of the Y lines, Beis Amud Beis, end of the line. Umi ika irbuvya kamei v'halo kulam niskarin b'skira. Right? Hashem can review every human being with just a glance of b'skira achat. Shene'amar hayotzer yachad libam, that in Tehillim it says that that God created their together their heart, and the pasuk goes on to talk about judging. So the point is that God can judge everyone at once. So why does God need Kida Amar B'Rosh Hashanah, as we say in Maseches Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Chet Amud Aleph? Why does God need everybody to get lined up? Elaki Hechi Delo L'Irbavu Inhu Bahadi Hadadi. No, the point is we don't want them to get mixed in with one another. Delishmeu Mai Da Amar Lahu, because God needs them to hear the questions and answers, and it's each one is being reviewed individually. And so as a result, from the perspective of humanity, that everybody needs to be organized. So miyad niknasa elefan of Malchus Romi Tchila. So the Romans come in first. So my time, why do the Romans come in first? Mishum de Chashiva, because of their tremendous importance. Minolan de Chashiva, and how do we know that they're important? Well, their importance is based on the fact that they appear in Tanakh. Diksiv, as it says in Daniel, v'teichul kol ara v'tidushina v'tadikina, that they're going to devour the entire earth, and they're going to trample it and crumble it. And this refers, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Zo Romi Chayevis. This is Rome, which is deserving of punishment. Shetiva yatsa b'kol ha'olam, because their nature, their influence has spread throughout the entire world. Umanalan demand dechashiv ayal bereisha. And how do I know that the first prestigious one gets judged, the most prestigious gets judged first? Because Rav Chisda, as Rav Chisda says, the Amar Rav Chisda, melech v'tzibur, if you have a king and you have a community member that are awaiting judgment, melech nischas, then the first to be judged is the king. Shene'amar la'asos mishpat avdo u'mishpat amo Yisrael. This is a pasuk in Malachim Aleph Parakhet pasuk Nun Tet, where the idea is that first God judges God's servant, namely the king, and then God judges the people. The time of why is it the case? So there are a couple of reasons that we might want to prioritize a king first. First of all, it's not appropriate for the king to wait outside. That's just not appropriate. And also, if the first thing you judge are the rabble out there, the public, well, the public tends not to be as well behaved as the king. Now, I'm not sure about that being true everywhere, but in any event, the idea is that, if you judge the people first, so then the king will face a harsher judgment. As Rashi says, this is 1, 2, 3, from the top lines of the narrow lines of Rashi, it's 6 lines down, 7 lines down, end of the line. Delipush charon af shal kadosh baruch hu, right? The God's anger is going to increase because of the negligence, the sins of the community. Shema chas v'shalom yipara min hamelech, and as a result of hearing the sins of the community, God may end up exacting that from the king. Kol sorchenu, and so as a result, mipnei hacharon, and he's going to be more severe on the king based on all of the punishment, all of the sins of the entire community. So, bottom line is, we judge the most important first. So, Amar Lama.
But this reference to Daniel with the Roman Empire is something that the academics can use to argue, which they do, that the book of Daniel was written in the 2nd century BCE rather than at the time of Daniel, because in Daniel's lifetime, Rome was a completely insignificant city-state. But by the time of the 2nd century, when the academics say, Rome was a terrorizing power already.
Interesting concept. So, yeah.
And certainly at the time of the Gemara, Rome ruled most of the
100%. Well, that's for sure in the time of the Gemara, but yes, absolutely. All right, well, very interesting point. So Amar Lahem Kadosh Baruch. So let's get back to the discussion. So yes, it's interesting to know that could actually impact either it's a wonderful nevuah, right, or a terrible nevuah, but either it's a nevuah or it was written later. So Amar Lahem Kadosh Baruch Hu b'may asaktem. So what did you do? Right. So what was your business? How did you act, the Roman Empire? Omrim lefanav. They say to God, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, Harbei shuvakim takninu. We set up many marketplaces. Harbei merchatzos asina. We set up many bathhouses. Harbei kesav izav hirbina. We accumulated a lot of silver and gold. V'chulam lo asinu ela b'shvil Yisrael. We did it all for the Jewish people. Oh, so beautiful of them to say. Kadeshi is asku b'Torah, because we wanted them to be able to engage in Torah. So as a result, we accumulated the wealth, and as a result, they were able to benefit from the society that we created, and they were able to study Torah. Amar La'am HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God says back to them, Shotim Sheba'olam, you're fools. Kol Masha Asisem L'Tzorach Atzmachem Asisem. You didn't do it for the Jewish people. You did it for yourself. Tekantem Shvakim lahoshe behem zonos. You set up the markets because you wanted to put prostitutes there. Marchatzos le'eden behen atzmachem. You created the bathhouses in order to beautify yourselves. Kesef v'zahav, and you got gold, silver and gold. Shalihu, all that money actually belongs to me, because it says, this is a pasuk in Chagai, Shenemar, that Hashem says that all the silver and gold belongs to God. Klum yesh bachem magid. Really what I'm asking of you is, were there any of you that disseminated zos, this, meaning pointing to the Torah that the God is holding? Shenemar, and maybe that's why the story is referenced this way. But and because we wanted to highlight the following points, Shenemar, Mivahem Yagid Zot. Right, this again continues in that pasuk, Perak Lamed, Perak Mem Gimel, pasuk Tet in Yeshaya. The next words are, "Who among them, declared this?" So the idea is ve'ein zos el Torah, and zos refers to the Torah. Shemen Amar, as we say when the Torah gets risen in either before or after the Torah reading. V'zos haTorah asher sam Moshe. This is the Torah that Moses put before us. So miyad yatsu b'fachei nefesh. So they run out, they leave immediately in despair, and so that is the first nation. Yatzas Malchus.
The Chazal couldn't reference this, but in First Maccabees, it's very clear that Rome was on the side of the Jews in the wars of the Maccabees.
Oh, against the Greeks.
Against the Greeks, yeah. They describes an alliance that the religious Jews made with Rome in those
Wow.
times.
Wow, very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. That actually is going to be very useful information for in just a moment, because that the point being that although they ended up destroying the temple, there's actually something that they might have thought would give them justification for having support of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because we're going to see that in connection with the Persians. Yatzas Malchus Romi v'niknasa Malchus Paras Acharah. So in come the Persians. So my timer, which seems to be quite appropriate, maybe you can call this a Daf Yomi coincidence, given what's going on in Persia/Iran today. That made the Jewish people and Israel be successful in its efforts. So my time.
Persia has been an expansionist power for 2,600 years.
Yeah, so there you go. So it's not something new. So my time of the Shiva Basra. But why did they go next? Because they were the next most important. Uminolan, how do I know that they're next most important? Tiksiv. Because, well, we'll go back to Daniel, and it says, V'aru cheva acharei tinyana damya lodov. And behold, another one, a second one, similar to a bear. Meaning that the bear is what represents Persia, and because the bear represents Persia, so as a result, and the bear is considered second, so that's referring to that they must be the ones who go in second. But Tani Rav Yosef, and Rav Yosef said with respect to this verse in Daniel, Elu Parsim, this refers to the Persians. Sha'ochlim v'shosim kedov, they eat a lot and they drink a lot like a bear. Umesur balin basar kedov, and they're fleshy like a bear. Umegadlin se'ar kedov, and they're hairy like a bear. Ve'ein lehem menucha kedov, and they don't rest when they're awake, I guess, like a bear. So Amr lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but Mayasak them. So again, what did you do? Omrim alafana v'ribono shalom harbe gesharim l'kasharnu. We created lots of bridges. Harbe krakim kavashnu. We captured lots of cities. Harbe milchamos asinu. We did lots of wars. The kulam lo asinu ela b'shvil Yisrael, and we did them all for the Jewish people. Kadesh asku b'Torah, because we wanted them to be able to engage in Torah. So look at what greatness we did for them. Tosos here points out. Harbe Gisharim Gasharnu. If we take a look at the Tosos, fifth Tosos on Daf Bet Amabet, Alfal Gaf de Romi Nami Tiknu Gisharim. Even though it obviously is true that the Romans also created bridges, so why was bridges specifically associated with the Persians? Kada Amar Perak B'Memad as we say, as it's noted in Masechah Shabbos, Mikomakom Einu Chashuvim Kol Kach B'Tikun Gisharim Kamo Paras. Apparently, the Persians were more engaged in that kind of behavior than the Romans. Interesting to know whether that in fact is true. I have no idea, but that's what Tosos suggests. It does seem like obviously a lot of mathematics did come from the Persians, but I don't know whether it would necessarily be more than the Romans. But in any event, that I think of bridge building as a sort of a scientific mathematical endeavor. Amar Lama Kadosh Baruch Hu, Kol Masha Azizim Tzlutzorach Atzmachem Azizim. Again, you did it for yourself. Takantim Gesharim Litol Mehen Mekas, because you made those bridges in order so that you could collect taxes and be the tax collector on those bridges. Krakim, you got cities. Azos behem Angaria, because you wanted an Angaria. And remember, Angaria, Rashi tells us here also, Angaria, it's from the bottom of the narrow lines of Rashi, 3, 6, 9, 12, about 15, 16 lines up. First word on the line, Angaria. Avodas HaMelech, these are servants of the king. Hamutelas al Yoshei Krakim, that are put, meaning that the king would what's the word I'm looking for? Require the service of people from a particular city. He would basically say, but he would get them for a particular amount of time, and that you would need to get a certain number of people from some kind of indenture.
Steinsaltz says that it's actually a Greek word meaning forced labor for the
forced labor. Okay, so yeah, I mean it's definitely a form of forced labor. Yes, absolutely. Lasos milchamos, in order to fight their battles, and to go out in the army, and to also take their animals, so in order to do his work. So the point is that's why you got all these cities, because you wanted more workers. And milchamos, just as we said with respect to Kesef, that everything belongs to God, so too with milchamos, God says, Ani asisi, I'm the one who wages war. Shenemar Hashem ish milchama, that God is a master of war. This is, of course, from Az Yashir, Perik Tesvav, Pasuk Gimel in Shmot. Kulum yesh bachem magid. Is there anybody among you who shared the Torah, has shared this? Shenemar mi vahem yagid zos. Again, citing that same pasuk, Perik Mem Gimel, pasuk Tet from Yeshaya. Ve'ein zos el Torah shenemar v'zos Torah asher samusha miyad yatsu milefanav b'fachei nafesh. Again, the Persians leave; they have no hope.
So an argument that the Persians could have made, but they didn't, was they created the first effective postal service, and there are examples in Chazal of messages not just individual, but messages showing up in Bavel from Eretz Israel and so forth.
Interesting. That's an interesting concept. But here, the answer that the Gemara is about to give to the next question could potentially answer your point as well.
Okay.
One second. The Persians saw what happened to the Romans. The Romans went into God. God told no, right? You did it all for yourself. Didn't the Persians know how the conversation was going to go with God? So Amrei, no, they thought that they had an ace up their sleeve. Inhu Satre Beis Hamikdash, they destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. V'anan baninan, and we built the Beis Hamikdash. So we have this ace in our hole, maybe up our sleeves. Maybe we should be able to be okay. And Tosos asks the pretty much obvious question, or answers the obvious question. V'anan baninan. Next Tosos, 6 Tosos on the daf. Hadalo ka'amrei shavnu Beis Hamikdash. And what about the fact that they didn't answer in the first place, that they brought back the Beis Hamikdash? Kishishal mehen b'ma asaktem, with what did you do? Dilfi zeh lo asu ela oto ador, because that was only true for that generation. Kadosh Baruch Hu shoal b'ma zaku b'kol dor v'dor, meaning what are you doing that facilitates every generation of learning Torah? So yes, it may be that they set up a postal service that worked during certain time period, but what are they doing today? They're doing nothing. The Persians are doing nothing to help with the Torah learning. So the point is, or to the extent that they're helping, the same response that God gave according to the Gemara, that God would give them. Oh, we're causing a lot of Jewish people to pray to you because we're waging war with God, with the Jewish people. That's not going to fly. God's going to say the same thing. You're waging war because that's what you want to do, not because you're trying to enable the Jewish people to pray more and to do more mitzvot. So that's and to learn more Torah. So that's not going to fly. And so again, that they're not going to work, and they're going to leave unhappy.
So a couple other things. They mentioned Koresh. Koresh is specifically mentioned as the Messiah in Isaiah 45. Rashi turns that on its head and interprets completely differently. But the obvious meaning would be that Koresh was Mashiach, which is really weird.
Yes,
Uh,
well, I mean, well, of course, there are a couple of things to say about that. One is that there were multiple people who could have been Mashiach,
Yeah,
and we say in every generation.
Yeah.
So there's
that's actually how Rashi takes it.
that is how Rashi takes it.
Yeah,
Okay, so there you go. So okay, so the
and
thing,
then a couple centuries after Chazal were done with the Talmud, the Persians fought with the Jews against the Eastern Roman Empire's persecutions.
interesting. So I mean, that doesn't surprise me. Meaning, obviously, it's interesting, right? I mean, the same response that I think God gave to the Romans and the Persians, God would give in connection with both of those statements. So, oh,
Yeah.
1 second, God, we fought with the Jewish people. Yeah, but if you also just, didn't fight, if the only reason that you fought with the Jewish people was because it was in your self-interest and not because you thought it was the right thing to do, well, then that's not going to.
Oh yeah, they were transactional. They were definitely transactional.
Exactly.
Although, an interesting, the Persians were not building statues and bowing down to them, which is a little different from the Romans.
Yeah. All right. Well, so again, that it emphasizes what we're about to see. V'chein l'chol umma v'umma, and then every nation. V'chi ma'acher dechazu l'kamai l'kamai lo mahani v'lo midi my time ha'ile. Well, 1 second. If every nation is going to come before God, don't they all see what happens to the nations before them? Why are they wasting their time in coming before God? The answer is Sabri Hanach Ishtabdu Bahu Yisrael. Because they think, you know what? The people who are coming before, they treated the Jewish people worse. And so as a result, we were nicer to the Jews. And so as there is Va'anan, Lo Shabnu Yisrael. We didn't subjugate the Jews. And so that's the basis. So basically, what we're doing is we're setting up a prioritization where basically one nation after the next says, oh, maybe we were a little better to the Jewish people. And so as a result, that's why we're going to think that we're going to get away and we're going to get some kind of reward. So
that's rewarding for the United States.
I know it's an interesting question of what does that mean for the United States? 100%. So the question is actually, obviously we believe that there can be righteous Gentiles. So the question is in the time of the Gemara, we had never seen a righteous nation. And so the question is can we imagine a righteous nation? It's interesting to note that some of the predictions in connection, now this is totally off topic, so my apologies for it, but some of the predictions associated about the timing of when the era of Mashiach would come correspond roughly to the timing of the Magna Carta. And one could argue that the Magna Carta is is arguably the most important document for modern history that enabled the existence of what would be called the modern good nation, that a nation could actually be positive and do good things for others. So it's
and yet King John Plantagenet, who signed it, instituted almost a century of persecutions of Jews in England that ended with the expulsion on Tisha B'Av 1290.
Yeah, not taking not 100%. Not saying that there's like a immediate trajectory in the right direction, but rather it's at least is a start of something. But in any event, it's interesting to think about. So Maishna Hani de Chashive Umaishna Hani de Lo Chashive Chashivi Lahu. So what's unique about the Romans and the Persians that we mention them and we're not mentioning anybody else? Because those nations will endure until the Mashiach. Now, it's interesting to think. Do we say that the Italians are really the Romans? I don't know. But in any event, meaning are the Romans really still around? Certainly the attitude that's associated with them is certainly around. And of course, arguably you can make the same point in connection with the Persians. All right. So Omrin Lefanov. So they're going to say, so now all the nations have been rejected. And so what are they going to say to God? So they're going to respond to God the following. We'll say a little bit further, and then we'll pause for and wish everybody a good Shabbos. Omer Lefanov, Ribono Shalom, Klumna Sato Lanu V'lo Kibalnuhu. 1 second. Did you ever offer us the Torah? You're telling us that who disseminated the Torah, but you never gave it to us. You gave it to the Jewish people. Second, 1 second. How can the Gemara ask the question that's and then have them say that? V'haksiv, we have a pasuk in Dvarim, Parak Lamed Gimel, pasuk bet. Vayomer Hashem misinai ba v'zarach miseir lamo. That Hashem came from Sinai, having shown forth from them in Seir, and having appeared from them in Paran, is the continuing words of the pasuk. Uksiv Eloka miteiman yabo, and also God came from the south. And from Paran, the pasuk continues, which is a pasuk in Habakkuk. So my bai b'seir, what did Hashem do in Seir? My bai b'Paran, what did Hashem do in Paran? Rabbi Yochanan explains, what is this pasuk talking? What are these psukim talking about? Milamed shech zira kadosh baruch hu al kol umav v'lashon. God went to every country and every group of people with their own language, and none of them accepted the Torah. Ad Sheba Eitzel Yisrael v'kiblua, until they came to the Jewish people and they accepted it. Right? This is the famous story about everybody asking what's in the Torah, and Hashem saying, and the Torah says this, and as a result they say, well, we can't live with that, and so we're not going to accept it. So Elahachi Amri. So rather, so they didn't actually say, God, you never gave us a chance, but rather, klum kibal nua v'lo kimanua. 1 second. Did we ever accept the Torah and then fail to observe it? No, we never observed it in the first place. We're not as bad as the Jewish people. The Jewish people, they accepted the Torah and often didn't observe it. V'aldot tivarton, and but in that statement, that is that's the refutation. Amai lo kibal tua. Why didn't they accept the Torah in the first place? So that doesn't work either. It couldn't be that that's what was said. So rather, what was said, Elakach omrim lefanam. This is what they were trying to say to God. Ribono shalom, klum kafisa aleinu har kegigis. Did you put over us the mountain over us like a barrel, the Loki bal nua, and then we didn't accept it? No. But Kamosha Asis Israel, but you did do that for the Jewish people. You told the Jewish people that if they didn't accept the Torah, you would drop the mountain right on top of them. It says that they stood at the foot, but literally underneath the mountain. What does it mean underneath the mountain? That Hashem flipped the mountain, tipped it over, and said, I'm going to put this on you like a barrel. And God said to them, if you accept the Torah, everything's good. There's going to be your burial location. So miyad omer lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and so the point is now we understand the question, right? The question that the non-Jews are saying is, you never forced us to accept the Torah, and you should have forced us to accept the Torah. So as a result, immediately God says, you know what? Harishonis yashmiunu. Did you accept the beginning? Meaning, Shenemar, and this is again referencing the pasuk, Perek Mem Gimel, pasuk Tet in Yeshayahu, continuing the conversation that's implicit in the pasuk, and the first ones will inform us. Sheva mitzvah gabaltem. What's your story? Did you accept the 7 mitzvahs of the 7 Noachide mitzvahs? No, you didn't keep the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Uminalon delo kaimon. 1 second. How do we know that they didn't keep that? Well, with that, find out. How do we know? How did God know that the non-Jewish people didn't keep the other mitzvahs? Well, the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Well, for that, you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. So, looking forward to continuing our learning together. Like to every now and then leave on a nice cliffhanger.
They're cliffhangers.
I know, it's amazing. It's the beauty of doing a daf. Sometimes people just want to do, not as much of the daf as they can. This was a good place to end and to leave you waiting for more. So
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Have a great Shabbos. Looking forward to continuing our learning together. Our learning of Maseches Avodah Zarah. As again, I can't help but emphasize enough. Let's not refer to it as doing Avodah Zarah. We're not doing Avodah Zarah. We're learning Maseches Avodah Zarah. So Have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. Looking forward to continuing our learning together next week. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good to be back.